Good evening and welcome to another edition of Electoral Reform Town Hall Series on NTA 24 Abuja. This program, which is brought to you by the Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center, is brought to you every last Saturday of the month, and it's supported by the MacArthur Foundation. Nigeria's democracy continues to evolve, driven by reforms, citizen engagement, and growing demand for inclusion. Despite the progress we've made, one reality still stands out: the underrepresentation of women in politics and governance. And across the country, women lead change in communities, sustain advocacy for good governance, and shape civic engagement. Yet, when it comes to effective appointive offices, elective and appointive offices, their numbers remain disappointingly low. The barriers, financial, institutional, and cultural, run deep. At the Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, we believe democracy thrives only when every voice counts. That's why PAACA continues to support efforts towards increased women's participation in the democratic process. In that spirit, we dedicate this October edition of Electoral Reform TV Town Hall Series to exploring how electoral reforms can drive gender equity and inclusion in Nigeria's political landscape. So tonight, we interrogate how Nigeria's electoral reform can drive genuine gender inclusion. What lessons can we draw from other democracies? And how do we move from promises to practice, ensuring women not only participate, but lead? I am Eze Nwanwagu. Thanks for joining us. Joining us tonight on this very special edition are Dr. Laz Eze, founder of the Talk Health Naija. We really did plan to make this an all-women panel, but I think that with all the things you have brought to the advocacy for inclusion, we just decided that Dr. Laz has to be here. You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And then the inimitable Chikas Kumle, Executive Director of Women Development Monitoring Initiative, WDMI. I hope I'm correct.
Yes, sir, you are.
And the only ever cerebral doctor, Adaora Onyechere Sydney-Jack, Executive Director, Gender Strategy and Advancement International, GSI.
Thank you, sir, to have me.
Great to have you.
Okay.
I'm excited to have Right Honorable Regina Anyogo, PhD, former Deputy Chief Whip of the Cross River State House of Assembly. It's just exciting having you, all of you, on this panel. I'm going to start with you, Chikas. And I just want you to look at some of the gaps that has happened around policy and implementation. We know that over the years there's been all kinds of policy, but the gap has always been implementation. What can we do to bridge this gap between implementation and practice?
I'm happy to be here, and thank you for giving me the floor to start up on this town hall. So yes, there are gaps that exist between policies and implementations, and for us to close in that gap, there needs to be an urgent policies that will need to be put in place. And why I say it's urgent, because at the heart of these issues are conversations about ensuring that gender equality issue does not remain lip service, does not remain just promises, but how do we move the numbers from just being promises to having the real figures in the room. First, with the gender reserves bill for women, as already in the conversations now, Nigerian women are advocating and campaigning and calling on the National Assembly and State Assembly members to vote for the reserved seat for women's bill. What that bill seeks to do is to have additional seats created in the National Assembly and States Assemblies, where the representation of women will not be just what we are having now, 4%, 4.7%. That is alarming, that is embarrassing. When we have that bill in place, we're going to have significant number of women across our parliaments, and that's where the issue of policy comes in, because policies that will be made in the country will be different. The policy drafting will be completely different, because policy drafting should be about the people for which that policy seeks to work for the people for which that policy seeks to represent. So if you have significant number of women in the room, they will not just be making bills that concerns women. They will not just be focused on issues that are around gender equality, but they'll be talking about issues that affects everyone, issues like health, security, issues like education. And we can't continue to have a country where promises are always being made. Since our return to democracy, we've had all the fantastic manifestos. We've had all the promises that you can hear anywhere in the world. But the women have not been given that rightful place. And sometimes when we say this, people will say, nobody will give you the space. But there's a structure that is always at play in politics. And when that structure is skewed to keep some people out, then there needs to be a deliberate effort to bring them in. And that is what this reserved seat seeks to do. Because apart from just addressing the gross imbalance that we have across the parliament, it is for the interest of democracy that we have women included in decision-making processes. And also, not just to sustain the democracy, we need to have a democracy that is viable, a democracy where there is diversity in the room, a democracy where the leadership will be a reflection of the people they govern. Because what we currently have is an exclusive democracy where half of the Nigerian population are not in the room. And excluding women is not just about the agenda. You're excluding half of the country's capacity to solve problems. You're excluding half of the country's capacity for the competency that needs to be in the room. I keep saying this, the Nigerian problem cannot be solved through one single perspective. We need different perspectives and also different ideas to solving the Nigerian problem.
Absolutely. Ada, you are big. You've been big, consistent on this advocacy. But I'm looking at, how advocacy, and by the way, you're a fantastic author. You have one of the most controversial books that I know in the market right now. So how do we make women's political leadership feel normal rather than exceptional?
Okay, so first of all, let's say that for me, in terms of advocacy, I'll refer to it as storytelling. I think I'll come from that conversation that storytelling is perhaps what I would say, what changes the expectations of people, because expectations are social construct. Now, because expectations are social construct, storytelling is rehearsing the new normal. And what that does is that it brings in visibility and repetition. When people see what they are thinking visible time and time again, there is a consideration of believing that that is the normalization of that context. And so storytelling then gives us the avenue to say, what do people think about gender parity? How do they see women in women's roles? How do we do narrative framing? And so when we're thinking of advocacy, I mean, there's been a great job done so far on the reserved seats bill for women. But again, we remember that the reserved seats for women it's not a silver bullet. When you get that bill, you also have to determine how women also operate within political parties. So the fact that it's not a silver bullet, you're also going to shape the narrative to speak to the context of one, how do we advocate for not just the reserved seats, but for opening up the space for women within political party structuring? Because if we do not reform the political parties and have the bill, it will be numerical fixes. And so what you have is women numbers increase, And then subtly but slowly it becomes tokenism, because even within the political parties, women's rankings are not growing. So for me, I would say that advocacy, storytelling gives us a narrative framing that looks at taking away, giving women narrative framing from a place of gender hype to a place of competence framing. So you're not saying, oh, the first woman to ever do this, blah, 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 because, despite the odds. We now focus on the competence and the ability of the human being. And so rather than say, oh, this woman is the first, we'll say, oh, X, Y, and B, head of so policy direction, created numerical strength. And that is how the normalization of competence and context comes to play, rather than the gender hype. And I think that's where the advocacy needs to shift, so that we can normalize women in leadership positions. And when we normalize narrative framing, we also look at qualitative framing. And so that means that we're shifting away from just women, as numbers, but women occupying key positions. Because when we see women numbers increase, when the bill is passed, then the question would be, what kind of positioning will those women who won through the reserve seats be having in the National Assembly? So that we begin to shape that the competence of women through those seats would look at, one, women heading finance, security, budget and planning, rather than just women in parliament. Okay, and women in leadership committees. So it takes a shift, a target-driven shift from just framing women as women for women issues, but then also releasing the facts through statistics that when women also speak, for instance, I like the fact that we have Dr. Laz here, and he's the only male in the kitty. Sorry about that word, but but the truth is, when we begin to normalize having conversations with men like this, in town halls like this, it also shows that we're not just speaking about women per se, we're speaking about development. And so that changes the narrative. And then maybe I'll just end it by saying the fact that, advocacy may seem simple to a lot of people, but it is layered. And it's also outcome driven. And it is not a destination. It is a roadmap. And so in thinking that it is a roadmap, the ideology should be that however we are mapping women's parity, gender parity, reserve seats bill for women, it is not an end in itself. It is the commencement of a larger context of development and of leadership.
We're going to get there. And you were harping so much on competence. In your conversation, competence ran almost like 6-7 times, which means that and when you talk of competence, you'll be talking about Dr. Regina Anyogo, 2-time member of the state Cross River State House of Assembly, Deputy Chief Whip. What was your story? Is there something you can share with us in terms of how you were able to navigate all the landmines that were put on your way and how you got to where you are today?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the political party has a lot of work to do, and also the governor of the state and the governors has a lot of work to do. For instance, during my time, the governor gave a mandate to the political party and also to the party chairman to ensure that 3 women emerged for Cross River State House of Assembly and 1 woman per senatorial district. We have 3 senatorial districts in Cross River State, and that was how my colleagues and myself emerged. And so the political party has to voluntarily give a quota reserved for women and ensure that these women emerge as candidates. So that was my story. Also, the issue we have in our political system that limits our participation in politics is the issue of systematic barriers. It's everywhere in this country. We need to address that issue. So the political party or the government in place will try to advocate, ensure that advocate for women coming to seek political office, and also try to ensure that they emerge. So that was my story in Cross River State.
Did you have any direct obstacles that
Yes, the men will not give you opportunity. We had direct obstacles from the men, but the political party and the governor will have to be intentional by creating that space for women creating like what they did by giving us 3 seats in 2015. Then in 2019, where the number increased from 3 to 5 because there was a change of government from the first governor to the other government. So we don't have that issue of barrier in Cross River State. We're always following the right thing. We always do the right thing.
Excellent. Dr. Laz, health, big on health, not just health, but also I know that you are getting into the political foray in some way. Your advocacy for health, how do you think these barriers that are created, this lack of inclusion, how do you think it affects not just the political health, but also the health of those who are excluded?
Yes, absolutely. I would like to give an analogy, something that happened while I was coming here. I was coming and I came with my first son. I just, okay, let's get to the studio. I'm going for an interview. And my other kids were crying while we were coming out. Why were they crying? They felt bad. They felt they should have come with us. They felt excluded. So it's a simple analogy, but that's what happens when there is any sense of exclusion, any form of discrimination. And when that continues for a long period of time, it begins to give this low self-esteem, low sense of self-worth. People begin to feel that they don't belong, so at any level where that happens. So in this circumstance, we are talking about representation, and democracy by its definition is about the people. Who are the people? Males, female, human beings. So when we humanize these things, it will help in the previous speaker, especially Adora's contribution, and not hammering so much on, okay, female, or the tokenistic component. Oh, women, you want okay, we're giving it to you, the numbers, but to look at it from the humanity component. When any human is discriminated against in any way or felt excluded, it may not be intentional. Like in this case, I got involved in this advocacy, thanks to Ada, who got me in. And I get to do this discussion, and a lot of men were like, not just men, even some females, nobody is stopping women from contesting. Do you want us to just give them as handout? And some came from legal angle that the constitution does not exclude women, which is true. The constitution didn't say, oh, it's only men that must run. But one of the questions I asked someone is, given our current political situation and the way things are done in political parties, I've been a national officer of a political party before, the way things are done even in the electoral process, will you be very comfortable with your sister or your mother or your auntie, being out there by midnight, and some people are throwing things and all those kind of stuff? So we felt like, okay, if the system goes normal, there could be more women participation. But the way it's been going, and sometimes it gets better, sometimes it gets worse. It's even kind of made it difficult for people to comfortably say, yes, I have a sister, a wife, or someone who is competent to go through that process, because we are scared if they could make it. So yes, there is that health component that over time, women just feel like that table is not for us. So they don't even come out in the first place. We have just few. And that has reflected over time, because you just see sometimes we say, okay, women are not involved. You sometimes when you say women come out, you see very few coming out. You get to be like, okay, now we say we want to give you, but we are not seeing you. Is the impact of long period of exclusion that they now feel like there's this lethargy, there's anxiety that goes with that, sometimes depression, So these are sometimes psychological distress. People tend to judge themselves harshly. The society also tend to judge them harshly. Oh, someone does something wrong. Woman, their own is worse. So we kind of normalize that. Okay, it's okay for a man to do it, but a woman can. So those gender lines need to go out, and this inclusion will help. Like Ada mentioned, is a process. So if we do this legislation from that view of including a very important demography, good number, yes, but not just the numbers, but also the quality, so that within the legislature, for example, where these policy frameworks are developed, you are distributing them across committees. The high chances that very important committees that contribute to the national development, you have a woman there who is not there as a civil society person, advocate, but also as a stakeholder, as a member, who is bringing a lot of experience, who is seeing certain things from certain lens. Let me give an example. For example, if you are talking about schools or education, not many would think about the linkage between the availability of clean toilets in schools and the quality of learning for the girl child. You know what? As a man, you're not going to think about that. But the chances that a woman could bring that on the table is very high, because if you don't have clean toilet in schools, what are about girls, especially in secondary schools, who are going into puberty, who will start menstruating, who will need a clean place to clean up? So if you don't have that, it's either they don't go to school because they don't want their school uniform stained and people will laugh at them, or they go to school, go to an indecent place and get infection, or go into the bush and stand the risk of being harassed, or animals, or So it takes people who've been in that shoe to just think about it, at the policy table where something is happening. So if they are not there, it might be downplayed because nobody will really see it from that. I just gave this as an example. So in these things is just something that needs to happen. Inclusive democracy and humanizing our policy making framework and humanizing our governance. And humans, people, has to do with both genders.
Well, the exciting thing about this panel is that the three delectable young women here have all contested election at one point or the other. And so I'm not just going to be talking to people who write books after contesting election, but people who have been in the foray. Well, we'll go on a break now. When we return, the Electoral TV Town Hall continues shortly. Stay with us. glad to have you back. So straight to you, Ada, again. A lot of people are looking at this reserve seat bill and they are looking at the economics of it. There are people who are arguing that it will increase the cost of conducting elections because of the additional seats that you're going to. What do you make of that? I want you to do the argument of the other side and then see how you can help our viewers to counter those arguments.
I don't make nothing of it, Mr. Izawa. I'm tired of making something of it. Because every time we have this conversation, we don't have this conversation from a place of development analysis for a lot of people. They're thinking numbers and expenditure of the parliament. They're not thinking about, development. They're not thinking about productivity. They're not thinking about amplifying the issues that deal with everyday Nigerians, because you have more numbers with capacity in the parliament representing across constituencies. Now, let's ask, what is the cost of the parliament that we have now? The men that we have now, and this is not to be, perhaps sexist in a way. How have we defined the role play? How have we defined their exemplary behaviors? How have we defined their impact in the constituencies that they have led? What is the cost of lack of productivity? What is the cost of lack of representation? What is the cost of lack of development? And I think that's how we need to switch the conversation, because people are looking at women as alternatives rather than the necessity. People are looking at women as numbers rather than the emergency. Because when you look at the categories of, she talked about, voluntary party quotas here in Cross River State, which I think is novel. And I think it does quite the magic at the state level. However, not every state has that opportunity and sense of reasoning to understand that women numbers in political participation increases development at the state level. We have over 100 and maybe 200 and something million Nigerians, and the only women in number representing that amount of people are just about 4.7%, and then 14 or 16 members in the House of Rep, 4 senators in the Senate, just women, representing, you're talking about 36 states plus the FCT. So the question for me, the answer would be that we need to change and reframe the narrative of consistently asking how expensive is it to add women, to develop, to create change, to bring dynamics, and to bring capacity and impact, not just for Nigeria, but at the community level. Because the burden bearers of exclusion are women and children. Crisis of exclusion is not about gender. The crisis of exclusion, it's about excluding the possibility of opening the channels where people can find divinity in belonging to Nigeria and saying that I have a country that works. I have a country that thinks of young people. I have a country that thinks of women, persons with disability. So in its entirety, I think they know that the political correctness of this argument is lost on us, because they know that the antagonization of using numbers as the arithmetic for political correctness whenever they bring this argument is also lost on the masses. However, I will not blame, or rather, shed the blame on anyone who thinks of this as an argument, because they may not know better. I will explain. When we went for public hearing in the Southeast, it was fascinating that the reserve seats bill for women was not even understood by the women, some women who were advocating for it. So they were advocating for the bill, but the context of the bill was that, they just want plenty women in the National Assembly. They didn't understand the arithmetic of the numbers. They didn't understand the numerical power of qualitative inclusion of women in parliament.
That's fine. So, Chikas, are you able to put us through? This town hall is actually educative. and the intention is to be able to unpack all the underbelly of this whole gender struggle. From your perspective, what is that thing that is that known, that needs to be known about not just the reserve bill, but indeed inclusion, gender inclusion and participation in our leadership?
Okay, so let me start with the gender bill. The advocacy for the bill is to have additional seats created. So what that means is the seats that are currently in existence are going to be intact, but extra seats will be created. One in the Senate for 36 states, plus the FCT, which is 37. So 37 additional seats in the Senate. Then one for House of Representatives from the 36 states, plus the FCT, that is 37 extra seats at the House of Representatives. Then coming to the state assemblies, we should have one seat from one senatorial district. That is 3 women from each state. She talked about the political will that got her to parliament. That is because the governor, who are very powerful in the Nigerian system, had that political will to bring the women. But we have states now where about 14 of them have no single woman in the state assembly. So I'm not going to talk about the political will of the governors or not. But what this bill seeks to address is that states such as the 14 states, sadly my state is one of them, that there's no single woman in the house, will be a history. It will no longer be something to talk about in a functional society like Nigeria. There should be women in the house so that issues that concerns women, children, and youth will be properly addressed by the people who wear the shoe. So yes, this is how the structure of the bill is going to look like. And that is why we're saying to the members, nobody is coming to take your seat. This is just to create extra additional seats. I'm happy that Dr. Adaora talked about the cost of it. But it's not even about the cost of it. It's about having people coming into the room to say, we have seen how much has been done to this day. How can we complement your efforts? What can we do to add value to national development? So it's not even about women. It's about bringing diverse voices into the room to strengthen the institution itself. We are a patriarchal society where people tend to question women more than they question men. Dr. Laz talked about the double standards in politics. All of us here ran for office. If we tell you our story, you'll be shocked. I've had people who called me for what happened to me. They are the ones crying, not me. Because through the rigor of running for offices, it has toughened us. And those things that happen are deliberately done to us to put us out. So what this bill also seeks to do is that these artificial barriers that are deliberately created to knock women out are done with. So it's not tokenism. And it's also not giving women power freely, because the women are going to compete amongst themselves across the different political parties. So no free ticket will be given to anybody. It's simply saying we want you to compete at a level playing field. Because what happens to us right now, women running for office, is the stakes are heightened. Anytime there's a woman in the contest, the last contest I did for House of Representatives, one, which is me, with 9 men. If you talk about having anybody to say, oh, you step down for someone, I was the first person that was approached, simply because they feel I'm a woman and it should be in the place of a woman to always calm down. But what will be said to me will not be said to the man because of the double standards. Again, because the stakes are always heightened, we all know what happens to women in politics. The level of violence that is deployed, the level of intimidation that even happens from the political party. You know, we don't have independent candidacy provision in our constitution, so everybody relies on the party tickets. There's so much intimidation, violence, and harassment even within the political parties. And some people are bringing in their cultural and patriarchal norms into play. So this bill is not coming to say we're going to destroy the system that is already in existence. We're simply saying give women a level playing field So they will start and have a fair play in the space to contribute to national development.
Chikas, that's a master class on the reform bill, very succinctly put. Dr. Laz, I'm going to come to you. You see, the issue of discretion and how we use that discretion is coming to play in this conversation. But if you board a plane, you meet the attendant reads instructions from a guide. She's not, or he is not allowed to play. You just say what is in that guide. Why is it difficult that, for instance, Dr. Anyogo talked about political will, and I always say, who is punishing lack of it? Who punishes lack of political will? But why do we have to depend on the benevolence of one governor or the other? Is there no, what is this? The struggle now is to structure this conversation in a way that it is not a handout. It is not a gift from anyone. How do we strengthen advocacy to take it away from discretion to practice?
That's a very good question, taking it away from discretion to practice. And I think that the bill is one of it. One way to, have a legislative framework that says these seats are reserved for women. And it also doesn't stop them from contesting for other existing seats. But look, also trying to do some kind of root cause analysis within our own cultural society. To what extent do we involve women? We see that in a lot of cultural settings, when it comes to decision making, it's just okay for just only men for different reasons. But also, we're also beginning to see some shift where we now have women wing, and they discuss things and also take position on a number of things. So putting up structures at different levels could help. And not just at the governance space, but also at the cultural levels. So as we're interrogating these, National Assembly elective positions, it will also be great if we also take it even within our local communities where decisions are also being made. Do we have all people involved in that decision making? Whether creating those structures that remove discretion. When we begin to normalize it at that level, it's going to create a different behavior. Behavioral change can be difficult and it can also take time. So we begin to accept that in our community, in our local level, in decision making, are the women in the room? What's their opinion? Do they have a representation? Okay, do we sit in the same room, or do they also discuss these things before it's finalized? Everything is put into consideration. So having that structure there will help, and help over time to create a different kind of behavior where subconsciously we'll feel that except we have all groups, not just women, but also even when you come among women, there are young women, there are older women, there are also persons with disabilities, whether men or women. So just that inclusion, beyond looking at them from gender lens, but at every level. Very well educated, not so educated, so rich, not so rich, so that demography, societal demography, do we have the views of everyone? So with those normalization and structures in place, over time we begin also normalize it at the,
it will become practice.
It will become more of practice.
Dr. Anyogo, listening to Laz, what came to my mind is mentoring or mentorship. I know that the struggle is on at the level of the legislature, but are we taking the pains? And I've asked Adaora this question at some point, telling our own stories to younger women, young girls, whether in the universities, is there something around that you try to do, given your experience in the legislature? Those obstacles that you faced, are you telling young girls how they can overcome them when they come into this space?
Okay, yes. We, as a legislator and a two-time member, we face a lot of obstacles when we contest an election. For instance, giving an example, when we to contest, there was this issue of discrimination in the field. I come from a particular ward, and my husband comes from a different ward, but the same local government. So they will tell you, when I wanted to contest, I was told to go to my ward and contest election. My people mobilized, where I was born and brought up, mobilized that I shouldn't contest in that place. I have to go to my husband ward and contest. But when I got to my husband ward, they said, no, you are only married in this place. In this place, go back to your father's house and contest election. So those issues were there, they were discriminatory, and I want a reform where they can change the narrative and also address the issues.
Excellent. Ada, you are in the thick of this reform bill thing with your colleagues, pushing and pushing. Are you seeing any silver lining? And I want you to be honest. Are you seeing any silver lining? I know there are champions in the legislature, but is that cutting deep into the structures of the legislature in a way that the victory is possible?
Well, my honest is always brutal, but I'll say it anyway. First, I would like to say, just touch on something you asked about mentorship. And for me, I would say I will use a quote to say, building leaders or building leadership is a relay race, right? Each generation passes tools, opportunity, courage to the next. That is how I see mentorship. It's a relay race. So what you're giving now, somebody else will give it next time. The person you give it to will pass it on, and it keeps enhancing. And it's not, like I say, it's never an ending story. It's a journey. And I use the launch of the Young Female for Leadership Network, which happened in Imo, as as a bouquet for that. When we set out to tell young girls that politics is the ability to contribute to your community and to be held accountable for the choices you make for your people, they were stunned, because for them, the politics and the practice of politics by the politicians is a different ball game for them. And in joining that network, they've been offered mentorship, engagement, speaking to different kinds of public-private leaders within the women's network. And I think that's how it happens and continues to gain tough. But coming back to you about the silver lining, I see a line. I don't know if it's silver, right? Maybe gold, crimson, red, a touch of rainbow, but I see a lining. And that lining means that there is a possibility that in our time that this bill will pass. However, there would also be negotiation on how far the lining can get. Because within the parliamentarians themselves, who this quest is about power broking and not about impact, they will determine to ask you what is the need for them and what do they stand to lose. So for instance, you're asking 1 seat per state for the Senate. That's 37 seats. 37 extra female senators at the Senate. You're asking for 1 extra seat for House of Rep across the 36 states, including the FCT, for the House of Rep, and then 3 extra seats. That's the total of 108 seats for the State Assembly. And the men are thinking, wait, 37, we're already how many? Okay, so if we have a consensus and these women, they can create a division in the power block, how do we match this? They're going to be thinking about calculation, strategic engagement of what this means for them when they want to do their deals. And this is about power for them. So yes, it will be passed, but then again, the numbers, there may be some sort of negotiation on the shift for the numbers, perhaps at a level that we have to maybe look at it first of all as a first leg into the room. And remember, Mr. Ezenwa, there is a sunset clause to this bill. a sunset clause which is about 4 election cycles, which is about 16 years. And after that, there'll be a sit back, a review, to see, have we looked at the numerical fixes?
And I think we should first get the land before we start talking about the maths.
Yes. So that's why I said there's a lining.
Yeah. Okay. So we're coming on a home stretch. So I want you to share your final thoughts. I take that as your final
Absolutely.
thoughts. So, Chikas, share your final thoughts. Laz, in the next 3 minutes, tell me something I've not asked that you wanted to talk about and on these issues. Let me start with you.
My final thoughts is women should get into the political parties in critical mass to ensure that their voices are heard within the political parties, and they should contest to be chairmen, secretaries, and other positions in the party, not just being the woman leader, because that's where everything starts. And coming to the electorates, it is time for them to begin to ask their leaders to be accountable. We vote you, we've given you a mandate, what are you doing with it? Because it's from answering the questions that we begin to know where the loopholes are. Are you delivering good governance to us? Is the good governance getting to our doorstep? And once you see that there's a gap, then you begin to ask the question, why do we have the gap? We're looking for ideas. Who has the idea? Let those with the ideas come into the room. Thank you.
Yes, my final thought on this is we begin to look at this, especially for the men, that we are talking about our daughters. Will I mind if my daughter becomes a president or a governor? What framework could make it less risky for her? Will I mind if it's my sister? Will I mind? So just from that angle, let's bring it closer. Because a lot of times when it's seen as male-female thing, it looks like, especially online, there's all these gender wars and stuff. But when we bring it closer, who are we talking about? Could it be my wife? Could it be my sister? Could it be my daughter? What could make that person have a say? And how do we put that framework in such a way that everyone have their say, and the majority, like they say in democracy, will have their way? But while the majority is having their way, they've already put everything in context. Have all voices heard to help us make better quality decisions.
I call you distinguished.
For me, it's not that the women are not ready to contest election. Just like Dr. Laz said, that the women are given opportunity, but where are they? The women are there. They're there in their numbers to contest election. But the only challenge we have is that give us the opportunity by making it free and fair, and give us level free ground. Because there is no woman that will come to contest election in a hostile environment.
How did you contest in a hostile environment?
Yes, I did. It was very difficult contesting in a hostile environment. So it scares other women from coming out to contest election. So give us a level playing ground, and try to develop a framework where to support women who are interested in contesting election.
For us in Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center, October is Women O'Clock. And courtesy of Adaora, we've dedicated this October town hall to the reserve seat bill. And I think we've paid our dues on that. And it's a good place to draw the curtain on this episode of Electoral Reform Town Hall Series. I want to specially thank Dr. Laz Eze, founder of Talk Health Niger, and Chikas Kumle, Executive Director, Women Development Monitoring Initiative, WDMI, and Mrs. Adaora Onyechere Sydney-Jack, Executive Director, Gender Strategy Advancement International, GSAI, and Right Honorable Regina Anyogo, PhD, former Deputy Chief Whip, Cross River State House of Assembly. It was a pleasure having all of you on the program. Thank you so very much for joining us. Electoral Reform Town Hall Series is brought to you by the Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, with support from MacArthur Foundation. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. The electoral reform half hour continues every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. with a repeat broadcast on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. on same station. Thank you for watching, and remember, democracy works best when every voice is heard. I am Ezenwa Wago. Good night.